Welcome everyone back to the Fort Drum Environment YouTube channel. Today we are touring the lost village of Sterlingville, New York, one of 5 villages taken over in the 1940-41 expansion of what is now the Fort Drum Military Reservation. That 1940-41 expansion took over 5 villages and over 525 families' homes and businesses. Sterlingville, located on Black Creek in the town of Philadelphia, Jefferson County, New York, is arguably the largest village that was taken over. Although sawmills were built in this location prior to 1835, the village derives its significance from the association with the iron industrialist James Sterling. Historian J.H. French claimed that this village was known as Delancey's Mill as early as 1807. However, other local histories date the earliest structures to 1824, when a sawmill was built by Edward Tucker and a large distillery was erected. The mill was soon abandoned, and a second sawmill was built on the site in 1834. That was also later abandoned until 1836, when James Sterling built another sawmill on the site. In 1834, the village contained 3 dwellings, but was so small that it was never even mentioned in the Gazetteer of the State of New York that was published that same year. Here we are walking from the bridge over Black Creek. The cemetery, St. Mary's Cemetery or Savage Varley Cemetery, would be to our backs, and we're going through the main crossroads. Here you're looking at the site, what was formerly known as Corbin's Block or Corbin's Store Corner. Here would have been the site of the Corbin Store, directly across from Hoover Store. Where you see that brown building directly across from us would have been Hoover Store. Originally, this is the site of the company store of James Sterling's Iron Works Company. And then the store later became a Limburger cheese factory until Dr. Stephen Corbin, a local physician, opened the store in 1880. His son, Charles B. Corbin, also known as Bert Corbin, and his wife, Ada, ran the store for approximately 55 years until they retired and sold. The Corbins retired in 1935, and the store then became an IGA store under its new owners, Richard and Maggie Kane, and they operated it until Labor Day 1941, when the store became the property of the U.S. government. A great book by Keitha, Kellogg, Petersen called Drummed Out is about the village of Sterlingville, and I urge you to check it out. I will link below this video a free resource you can read online at the New York State Archives. Here we're looking over at the Hoover Store, and then to our right, where you see the large white sign, would have been the Fortin House or the hotel in Sterlingville. Where you see the brown buildings to the left is where the Hoover House once stood. Merton Hoover and his wife Anna bought the store in 1919 and owned it until September 1st, 1941, Labor Day weekend, when the U.S. government then took ownership of the land. Merton was a partner with his father Frank, and they operated the Hoover cheese factory, which was on the Corbin block directly across from the Hoover business you see in front of us. Here's the interior shot of Merton and his wife Anna. Merton was the postmaster for Sterlingville for a number of years, 1934 until September 1st, 1941. The building is a 2-story, as you can see in the background, and the store was on the lower edge of that building, and the upper floor was a social center. Here we're walking around the previous site of the Sterlingville Hotel, also known as the Sterling House or the Fortin House. I mentioned Keitha Kellogg Petersen's book, Drummed Out. Keitha, with her mom, dad, and her 4 siblings, lived in this house, in this hotel. It originally was opened in 1840 and burned to the ground in 1880. It was rebuilt by 1890. However, it burned again on December 8th, 1928, when Keitha and her family lived here. Everyone got out safe, but the building was a total loss, and it was never rebuilt. Perhaps some of the things I like most about Keitha's book and meeting her years ago was her stories of Sterlingville. She used to go to Corbin's store, and apparently, if she could spell the word Constantinople for Bert Corbin, he would give her a chocolate cream drop candy. I'm not sure I could spell the word Constantinople, but I love those kinds of memories. You can see some of the remains of the walls that are moss covered, as well as the old cistern. Most of the old buildings in Sterlingville had a cistern system in them, so you want to be careful if you're out walking any old farmstead properties in the area. We've also found a number of wells over the years have become uncovered. As you can see, we do allow training to occur here. There's just no digging. The village of Sterlingville is a National Register of Historic Property and therefore protected under federal law and by the Cultural Resources Program that maintains those properties. Here's how the Sterlingville Hotel looked. And this is Miss Keitha was being pulled here on the wagon. This is probably right before the building burnt in 1928. Excuse me. Just beyond the hotel in the village was the schoolhouse. It was a traditional one-room schoolhouse until the 1930s. It housed grades 1 through 8 and had 2 teachers. One teacher for grades 1 through 4 and another teacher for 5 through 8. And eventually students start getting transported into the Philadelphia High School. Past 8th grade, prior to 1930, kids would have taken the train at the depot right in Sterlingville into Carthage. This picture was labeled a walk through Sterlingville, and you can see the schoolhouse in the upper left corner. And here's the schoolhouse in the 1930s. Keitha's book has a number of class pictures in it from the schoolhouse in Sterlingville. To our left here, where you see the 2 brown military training buildings, was a blacksmith shop at one time. Keitha calls it a shop of many names. In the 1890s, it was a barber shop. In the 1930s, it was referred to as the Bucket of Blood shop, where card players would gather for a night out. In the 40s, this building was moved by truck to the highest point in the town of Philadelphia and was used as an air observation tower. It was remodeled, and the tower there was added to that building when it was moved by the American Legion at no cost to the taxpayers. It was done by donation. It was manned 24/7 by men, women, and children in the village who felt it was their patriotic duty to watch out, to observe from that tower top. Apologies here. The day I filmed this, we had some rain. It's not a ghost feature. It's just a raindrop on my lens that I didn't notice till later. Directly ahead of us is the Hoover corner block, where the store and social building stood. As I mentioned previously, the village of Sterlingville is actually under the National Register of Historic Places, which requires us not to damage the property, which means no digging, no earth-moving activities. It's now an archaeological site under those federal guidelines. Dr. Lori Rush, our Cultural Resource Manager, together with our Integrated Training Area Management team, have made it possible to train in the village of Sterlingville, which is a true North Country crossroads community. They have transformed it into an asset for training to be also used as that crossroads community as the village was originally built, while also maintaining no damage to the site of Sterlingville, to the archaeological remains. They have came up, Dr. Rush and our ITAM training range division team have come up with new techniques to what we call harden the sites. Here you see the cistern is supported by several layers of sandbags, which have gotten some foliage growing on them. As you toured around the village today with me, you may have also seen walls, like these foundation walls, have been supported by sandbags and other structures. And at times you won't see the foundations any longer. We have done a process we call hardening, where we lay geotextile fabrics down across the site, fill it with sand, add other layers of geotextile fabric, and add other layers of fill. So they're actually able to put equipment, the military, while they're training, can actually put equipment into these sites. Here we're looking at the old St. Mary's, or the Catholic Church, after it was moved into the center of town. Prior to that, St. Mary's was built in 1838, the earliest church for the village of Sterlingville. It was built at a cost of less than $500, that original church, on land donated by James Sterling. James Sterling was a Quaker, but he followed James Leray de Chameau's promise of all religions having a place in the North Country, in our new country. That original church burned in 1848. In 1854, a much larger church was rebuilt. The congregation increased in size. Sterling brought several families from Ireland, who were mainly Roman Catholic, and the need for a larger church was there. So they built a larger church. These original two churches were across the river, over by the Savage Varley or St. Mary's Cemetery, across the river, across Black Creek. In 1885, the church that was across the river was moved into the site we're on now. It was moved across the ice and moved right into the center of the village. I'm holding up a bit of stained glass that is still on the surface of the site here, and I've returned it to the ground. It's important to leave artifacts that you find on any site so that future archaeologists or historians can tell the story of the site, and that these artifacts remain in situ or in place. The site is pretty overgrown, which is why I filmed the footage in very early spring. If we were to go out there now, which is September 2020, you probably have a hard time finding this site. It's pretty overgrown in there. But that also helps hide the site from looters and from other issues. Here's some old images of the St. Mary's Church. As you can see, it's a significantly sized church. This is the interior altar. These images are from Miss Keitha Kellogg Petersen's book. Father O'Brien was the last priest at St. Mary's before they closed in 1941. This is the Union Church, built in 1856. It was built as a non-denominational Protestant church. Here's the interior view. Non-denominational because no denomination at that point had enough members to support their own church. So it was used by Universalists, Baptists, and Methodists within Sterlingville. Later primarily used as Methodist prior to 1941. Here we're leaving the church site and going back to the Sterlingville corners, the main corners. Sugar maples like the one I just filmed are indicators of when you would find foundations in our farmsteads throughout Fort Drum, throughout the North Country really. At one time, Sterlingville probably had several of these large sugar maple trees that shaded the house, that shaded the Limburger cheese factory in town. There's, as you can see from the view right here, there's very few of those sugar maples remaining in Sterlingville itself. These two large trees, which are used as a parking or a bivouac area for our military training purposes today, is the site of Jim Sterling's house. Little teaser, I'm hoping to do a future video just talking about kind of North Country characters in our villages across Fort Drum. And we have several. One of my favorite stories is always about Jim Sterling. You can see all that's left of the foundation is a few walls and the steps that were left in front of the building. Here's how that building looked, though, in the 1920s and 1930s. This is a look down the road towards the other crossroads. Sterlingville was made up of two crossroads. So that's looking back towards where the iron factory was at that second crossroad. And then we're going to go back to that main crossroad where the stores and the hotel, schoolhouse were. Sterlingville in its heyday was a true prime community for the North Country. It sat right on the railroad, on a railroad depot that served from Watertown to Rome to Pulaski. The Sterlingville Depot was hugely important, especially since it was used primarily by our dairy farmers in the area to transport milk to New York City. At one time, Sterlingville had a Limburger cheese factory where the old Corbin Block store was. Previously, as I said, that milk was sent by train. But when that cheese factory opened up in the center of Sterlingville, not only did farmers have an outlet for their milk that was much closer, the cheese factory used over 6,000 pounds of milk a day, but it also got farmers weekly checks, which was a huge difference in their viability of farming and being dairy farmers. Cheese factories were hugely important across all of Jefferson County, Sterlingville not excluded. A lot of folks don't know, but interesting fact is Jefferson County is the first place in the U.S. to make and create a product line and manufacturing line for Limburger cheese. If you have kids watching with you, maybe buy some Limburger cheese and all of you get to try it out. Maybe do it outside. It's a pretty stinky cheese. It was kind of a local favorite for a very long time. It's fallen out of favor because of its smell, if the smell was ever in favor. There is a story that they loaded the Limburger cheese at the depot in Sterlingville, and it all got dumped along the way because the train technicians believed that the cheese had spoiled before it reached the city. Here's some other additional images of Sterlingville. Under FDR's New Deal Act, he had photographers travel the U.S. under the Farm Security Administration's project, a New Deal project. And these photographers, artists, took images of the villages. You can find them at the Library of Congress pages under the FSA photographs. You can find quite a few of our different villages. Here you can see the IGA store in the background with the children in the foreground. Here's St. Mary's Church on the left. Hoover Store would have been behind that block of trees. To the right would have been the Corbin Block, or the IGA store. I don't believe it was an IGA store yet in this. This is one of our earliest pictures of Sterlingville Ironworks. You can see the iron furnace to the right. This picture was labeled Irish Workers at Sterlingville. One of my other favorite images, it's hard to pick one, is of the school kids having a 4th of July parade through Sterlingville itself. A tradition that's near and dear to my heart. Being a Town of Champion resident, our 4th of July parade has always been one of my favorites. Here's the depot at Sterlingville, New York. And this is a picture of the old iron ore site. The furnace is no longer standing. All you'll find is the remnants of the iron making process. As I talked about, we do allow training with no digging in Sterlingville. And you can see from some of our images, our 10th Mountain Soldiers training throughout here. I hope you liked walking through the village of Sterlingville today. I'd love to see any additional images you have of Sterlingville. And could add them to a future video. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned. Subscribe to our channel to find new videos and hit that thumbs up. Thank you.